Good morning and welcome again to Friday at Fran's. Fran's still here in Portland. So I'm going to do a little bit about needles. But before I get started, before I forget, luckily I got on Facebook and checked my emails this morning because we have a sale coming up next week, our Fran's Red Bag sale. So if you've got your red bag, dig it out, make an appointment, because you get 25% off everything that fits in your red bag. If you don't have a red bag, this one last time, we are going to give you an opportunity to still get a discount, 15% off everything that fits in one of our regular shopping bags. So don't forget that this week and take advantage of some great savings. Today we're going to talk about needles. Needles that go in the sewing machine specifically. Sometime in the future we may have somebody talk about hand needles, but that's not quite my area of expertise because hand is not an acceptable thing when you got a great sewing machine. So we talked about thread a couple weeks ago, and thread, the larger the number, the finer the thread. Needles make a little more sense. The larger the number, the larger the needle. So most needles start at like a size 60 or may also be called a size 6. And then they go up to, I think the largest I've seen is 120. So the bigger the number, the larger the needle is. So think about that in terms of the weight of the fabric that you are using. So that's one thing we're looking at about needles. The other thing that we look about is the point of the needle. So I find most people who go looking for a machine, and this is my little drawing here, don't take it as being exact, but most people that go look for a needle, they just say, I want a needle. And if they're not sure what they're using it for, we give them a universal needle. A universal needle does just kind of what it says. It can work on any type of fabric. You want to think about, again, the size of the needle based on the weight of your fabric. But a universal needle will give you a good quality stitch, no matter what type of fabric. To get the best stitch, though, you want to look a little bit more at what you want. So basically there are 3 types of needles. There's the universal needle, which I've got kind of in the center here. And then there's a sharp needle. A sharp needle is just what it implies. The point on the needle is a very fine, comes to a great point. So types of sharp needles that you can find are, so a microtex is one that's used, most people use this on better fabrics, but that's got a very sharp point on it. Your denim needle has a sharp point on it. When I did my jeans demo last week, I mentioned using a denim needle because that sharp point is going to cut through those heavy threads that a denim is made of, and it's going to give you a sharper, straighter hem. If you're working with a knit, you want a ballpoint needle, and that's rounded at the bottom. So sometimes it's called a ball. Oops, I missed one more sharp needle, and that's a top stitch needle. Again, because when you're top stitching, you want your line to look your line of stitches to be very straight. So you want to penetrate those threads. On a knit, you don't want to penetrate those threads because it can cause a hole or it can cause a run. So that's why we have ballpoint or stretch needles, and they have that rounded edge on the bottom. So we've got the sharps, the ballpoints, the universals in the center. It's neither real sharp nor real rounded. So your universal needle will sew on just about anything. So those are the sizes and types of needles. We're going to look a little bit about the anatomy of a needle. So besides, why do I have all those kinds of sharp needles? Because that has something to do with the groove that comes down the front of the needle. that groove guides your thread to the eye. And so the microtex, your embroidery needles, make sure they protect that finer thread that might be going through there. Top stitch needles, you're usually using a little bit heavier thread with, so that groove is a little bit wider to accommodate the threads. I didn't do different types of eyes on here, but the size of the eye will change also. So an embroidery needle and a top stitch needle have a bigger eye on it. So that's, if you're having trouble threading your needle and you don't have an automatic needle threader on your machine, you can always go to a top stitch or a embroidery needle and have that bigger eye to make it easier to thread. The other thing, so that's the front of the needle. The back of the needle has this little C shape on it, and that's called the scarf. The scarf is where your hook on your bobbin, on your hook, comes around and catches the thread. It goes into that little hook and grabs the thread. So that has to do with the timing of your machine. And so you want your hook to hit that just right. So if you were sewing fine and you change your needle and you're skipping stitches, you might make sure that you've got that needle all the way up, because sometimes, I know what happens to me is sometimes I take out a small needle and I put in a large needle, and I haven't loosened that screw enough to get that needle up all the way, and it causes problems. Sometimes it actually hits the bottom of my hook area. So just be aware of that and just double check that you got that needle in all the way. And that reminds me of another thing. Every home sewing machine needle has a flat back, and the reason they went with the flat back is so that you can be sure that you've got that needle in correctly. The flat always goes to the back. There's a few exceptions. If you've got an old Singer featherweight, they do go in on the side, but always think that that flat, that scarf, has to be where the hook is going to catch it. But again, all the modern sewing machines have that flat to the back. That means all sewing machines use this same type of needle, and I know you can't see this with the excuse me, the glare today, but it's a size 130 or 705H. That's your home sewing needle. If you've got a long arm machine, you're going to have a rounded needle, which has its own unique ways of putting it in to get it straight. But again, the home sewing machine needles, they're making it as easy as possible for us to get that needle in correctly. So that's a little, one last thing. If you stop by the shop, we've got these Schmetz flyers that are going to give you some of the information I have today and make some recommendations on the back with, depending on what type of thread you're using, what type of needle you might want to use. We sell the Schmetz in the shop. We also sell the Inspira. Both of these are great quality needles. Both of them, I know the people that worked on manufacturing and redesigning the Inspira needles from an old Singer factory. So they're using great quality German steel to make these, and hopefully changing to US steel soon. But anyways, making them to the specifications that sewers need. So if you want more information, when you come by the shop, ask Lydia or Summer, and they'll pull out one of these for you. Lydia will be with you next week, and it will be back at our regular time at 9:50, and I'll be back in the shop starting the first part of May. And thanks for joining.